Louise, who are you?
Who am I? Who am I? Well, as you can see, I've got Maria in the Moon behind me, positioned there. That's kind of the book that I'll mostly be talking about to do with this discussion, because obviously, as I once said to Madeleine, Maria in the Moon is fiction, but it's kind of the memoir that I could never write back then. And it does explore, obviously, the issues that we're going to talk about. A young woman called Catherine Maria who's buried a very traumatic event, which resurfaces as she volunteers at a crisis line. Madeleine?
I think you need to give your brand new book a wee mention as well, though.
I do, don't I?
Yeah.
Okay, it's over there. I will get it when someone else is speaking. So as, I Am Dust is the new book, which is set in the theatre, a ghostly psychological...
Excellent. Madeleine?
I just heard seagulls. That sounded really strange. I am Madeleine Blank, author of Unbroken. My one book, I feel very kind of imposter syndrome sitting amongst these two very, very published authors of many titles, but my story is a true story. So mine is a memoir, and it is my story of being gang raped at 13, and it really follows my journey of survival, healing, forgiveness, transformation, and hope. And since I have published my memoir, I've gone on to be an international speaker, sharing my story to end the shame, the stigma, and the silence surrounding sexual violence, but also to help and inspire other people to find their courage and to find their voice and to live their most bravest life, because we can heal after rape.
Thank you, Madeleine. So my name is Michael J. Malone, and this was my most recent book. It's called In the Absence of Miracles, and the book tells the story of a guy called John Docherty. And when the book opens, his mother has been taken into a nursing home, and he realises he's got to sell the family house to pay for her care. So he goes back to the house, and he's not been there for years, and he's clearing it out, and he looks in the attic, and he finds evidence he had a brother who disappeared when he was just a baby. So that opens up a whole kind of raft of questions, and in facing this family secret, he's forced to come to terms with other family secrets. So that's kind of what the book's about. And actually, can I just, Madeleine, when you were talking there, it reminded me of something. When I was doing the research for this book, I spoke to the clinical lead at the charity Break the Silence, which is a charity that helps adult survivors of childhood sex abuse.
I spoke at their conference.
Yeah, and you spoke at our conference last year, very movingly, I have to say. So anyway, when I was speaking to the clinical lead, I asked her, there are all kinds of abuse happens to people, children, but sexual abuse brings with it something more, something worse. And I asked her what that is, and she said one word: shame.
Absolutely.
And when you mentioned that just a moment ago, I thought perhaps you could talk about that, both from, well, you're a clinical person yourself, so
I'm a psychotherapist as well. And my shame lied to me for years. My shame told me that I was dirty, disgusting, contaminated. I had no self-worth, no self-belief, no self-confidence. My shame silenced me because I was so concerned what other people would think if they found out what had happened. I used to think that being raped was a reflection of me. Now I know that 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists, that the shame never belonged to me, it always belonged to the perpetrator. But it's such a intimate crime, and we're also fed so many victim-blaming messages that I just took it all internal, which I know is not uncommon. I had guilt, I had blame, and I had shame for years and years and years, and actually speaking out, doing the very thing which I thought I could never do, has ultimately cracked all of my shame, because I don't care, who knows now. I'm not what happened to me, I'm not those events in my life. None of us are the events in our life, but we get conditioned by what happens to us. So it's really, really hard to walk through shame, but it is it is possible.
Shame leads to so many other things as well, doesn't it? It's not just in, say, the sexual aspect, but I was talking to my sister recently in the car, because I've recently written my memoir, which, as I said, Maria in the Moon was kind of the memoir I couldn't write, and I've finally found the courage to write it. And we were talking about how part of shame often is feeling defensive immediately when there's nothing to defend. We found in life that we imagine people accusing us of things that we haven't even done, and we develop a defense in our head straight away before someone even says it. Wish I could think of an example of what we were talking about. And we were saying, where does that come from? Why are we so defensive? We haven't done anything. And it comes back to shame, doesn't it? We haven't done anything, but...
And the fear of being judged, because that's really, we're the ones that are judging ourselves. We assume people will think this, people will think that, but that's coming from ourselves. It's not coming from anybody else. So it's the judgment that we do on ourselves is more damaging than being judged by other people. We give ourselves a tough time.
There's, are you both familiar with the speaker and researcher Brené Brown?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Louise, you've got to listen to her. She's got several talks on YouTube, and there's one on vulnerability, which is just, I think it went viral when she released it. She's an amazing woman, brilliant speaker. She's irreverent, smart, and warm, and it really comes across when she's talking. So anyway, in one of her talks, she talks about shame and guilt, and she says, in using these, or as part of that mental process, guilt tells us we've done something wrong, but shame tells us, and this is how we interpret it. Shame, we interpret that as we are wrong, and that's where all those that mental torture that we put ourselves through, in her view, that's where that comes from.
She also has an amazing film on Netflix called The Call to Courage, and it just resonates with me so much, because it's about being vulnerable takes courage, but when we do step into that courage, it just opens up so much. When we can embrace our vulnerabilities, we just become more human and more authentic, and she is the most authentic person. But yeah, she's a specialist in blame and shame, and we're all so good at doing that.
I wanted to talk as well and ask you two how you approach this. As I said earlier, initially I approached the topic of childhood sexual abuse and buried memories and all those things as a fiction, because it was an easier way to do it. And only now have I kind of had the courage to lift that lid and probe it as a real thing where it's me laid bare, which I have to say, by the way, was much harder. And I still don't think I'm done with the memoir, and I still don't know if I'm happy with it, and I still don't even know if I'll share it. But I wondered how both of you, because obviously Madeleine's is fact, Michael's is fiction, and how you kind of approach those things. I'll kick off with Michael.
Well, first of all, the idea came to me more as a kind of plot idea. And then, because as a crime writer, we're always looking for something different to do with the story. And when the idea came to me, I kind of stopped and went, oh, wait a minute. Can I do that justice? When I do it, is it going to feel exploitative to people who've experienced it? So there was kind of judgments that I had to make before I went there, so to speak. And then it was a matter of like, okay, this particular angle needs to be talked about. So let's do some research first. So I did quite a bit of research. I spoke to victims, I spoke to clinical people and how they might handle it. I read testimonies from people who'd experienced it. And only then did I feel comfortable enough to have a go at it, so to speak. So interestingly, the book, this is the very first book that I wrote, although it's the 11th book to be published. So I wrote it in 1996, which was a long time ago. I didn't have hair then either. So anyway, that's another story. So anyway, the book kind of sat in a computer file until just 2 years ago, and I'm having a conversation with Karen. I said, look, this story has stuck with me, but it probably needs a wee bit of work in terms of like the execution. So I told her about it. She says, oh yeah, that sounds what I would like to work with you on that one. So I went back to the book, and it was dreadful. Oh my God, it was overwritten, full of exposition, dialogue was so clunky, and pretty much ripped up and started again, which was an interesting experience. But then that sort of brought new opportunities to research as well, because in those intervening years, had the subject moved on any, and I mean the subject being male victims of sexual abuse, and the answer is no, it hasn't. And if I just segue onto a conversation that Madeleine was also privy to, well, it was a talk more or less at the Break the Silence conference, and there was a guy called Duncan Craig who's done amazing work in this field.
Third Duncan Craig now.
Yeah, he's what a guy, he's just fantastic. And as part of his talk, he said that his feeling as a victim himself, or a survivor, his feeling was that male survivors have a huge debt to female survivors because they've paved the way. And by talking about it, it's allowed them to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And he also said that he gets a lot of flack for talking about male victims. And he says this needs to be an and conversation, not a but. And it happens to women, it happens to men. Let's stop sort of separating the two out and help everybody that needs the help. So, and when I was writing the book, it was because there's so much chatter online. By chatter, I mean it can get quite aggressive at times. I was quite careful that I didn't politicize how I did this. I'm telling a story, I'm not giving a lecture. So that was a very, very strong part of my methodology in writing the book.
And Madeleine, what about you with it being factual?
Yeah, well, for me, I do feel like an imposter, I don't feel like a writer. I just wanted to write my story down, and once I made that decision, all of the words just appeared to me. So I do really feel like I was just a typewriter. At night, I would just see them literally flying around my head, and I would just sit down at my Mac and the words flew out of my fingers, basically. My editor, my friend Joe in LA, would say, you know, if you've got writer's block, let me know. I said, actually, it's the opposite. I want to slow it down. It's too fast. But it was always just to put it down on paper for me, because I'd written my story briefly, about 12 pages. Somebody suggested writing my story down. And that process, the original process, took me 4 years because of my shame. I would stop and start it, and I thought, there's no way I can let him read it. But eventually, when I made that decision to write it, after 4 years, it flowed. So it was very much, it felt like it was the right time to share my story. And it was different, obviously, because it is a true story. And I always find it really interesting in the crime world that people will love to be terrified, be scared witless, or read about any fiction story. But when it comes to true life, they're like, oh, no, I don't think I could read that. That's true. And you think, well, you read all this other stuff. But sadly, as we all know, my story is not uncommon. My story is just a story of many, many people. And even now, 3 years after being published, I get messages most days from people that say, yeah, this happened to me as well. And just recently, somebody actually said to me, they like my, they come onto my public page, but they don't want to like any of the posts, because then their family will know that they've also maybe been raped or abused. And it just shows you the shame and the stigma is just so alive in so many people. So right now, for me, I guess I maybe work more as a speaker than a writer. I just really want to end that. And as Michael was talking about courage, I think courage is contagious. You know, somebody else speaking out helped me to find my voice, and now I just really intend to pay that forward. And it's exactly what Manchester survivors do. You know, by Duncan speaking, he will give someone else the permission to find their voice. And we are like mirrors. You know, if people can see me speak, then they just think, well, maybe I could share my story. And then it's just the ripple effect, and we never know where it goes or who it impacts on. But it is like a sense
well,
of...
one of them, Madeleine, that you impacted. Because
it's like a sense of responsibility now and a sense of duty. If I can do this, then I feel I have to do it, or I choose to do it. I don't have to, but I choose to because I can do it.
I really think I would not have gone on to eventually write the memoir had I not met you, read yours, got to know you. And I almost want to say I've been a little bit counselled by you, but it's not that because we're friends. But you, over the years, have asked me some really good questions when I talk about something. And you'll say, so why do you think you do that, Louise? What do you think that's about, Louise?
Sorry.
One of them was that I do often make really inappropriate jokes. Madeleine knows this. When I say it at her house, I'll make jokes.
Well.
You know,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, everybody knows that. But Madeleine was interesting. She delves deeper and she says, why do you think you joke about those things? And you start realising it's a coping mechanism. It's the way to talk about things like that without really talking about them. You made me address and look at that.
Yeah, your humour and your laughter is really what saved you. You're an entertainer and you want to keep the peace and you want to make sure everyone's okay, and you use your laughter and your humour. That's your strength and that's your beauty. That's the most fantastic part about you. It really is. Oh, all emotion. But yeah, it is. It's your strength, and it's because my dad was very much like that. As you know, my dad was a Holocaust survivor. And he mucked about like nobody's business. He was used to play pranks on us all the time. You'd go to bed, there'd be a hairbrush under the duvet, or he'd take your dinner away and make the phone ring. There were 5 of us. We'd go to a restaurant and he'd say a glass of water and 7 straws. He was always mucking about. And if you met him, you'd never know. But his laughter was his strength as well. The ability to laugh after experiencing huge trauma is strength. It's real strength, Louise.
Yeah, Louise, can I ask you, when you started writing Maria, was it a conscious decision to go there, and were you aware of your audience when you were writing it?
Oh, was it a conscious decision? Well, I did write it during a traumatic time because I wrote it when we were flooded in 2007, so we were not living in our house. The world was kind of being rebuilt around us. Katie got type 1 diabetes in that period and was very ill, so I was at home looking after her. So I suppose it's quite powerful that I wrote such an intense, powerful book while I was going through that. I think I mainly wanted to explore memory and burying memories, and then I realised that in doing that, I'm going to have to find the memory in the book, or the reader won't be satisfied, if that makes sense. So was it a little bit unconscious, maybe? I'm not sure. I don't know if I thought about my audience, because I never knew I would eventually have that published, because obviously I wrote it 10 years before it was published. So I'm a bit vague, aren't I? I'm not sure. I'd have to think some more on that. What about you, Guy? Well, Michael, with your fiction, did you think very much? You obviously did with your research, I guess, for the your latest.
Yeah. I was very much aware that I was heading into potentially troubled waters and a topic that's become unnecessarily politicised. So I was aware of that, and I wanted to. I think the thing is, when you've got a message as a novelist, you don't want to deliver your message like a lecture. It has to come through the eyes of the characters. It has to come through their experiences and their reactions. And readers don't want to be lectured. So that was a sort of big thing for me in being aware of that. Madeleine, can I sort of flip that on to you? So was the writing of the book, was it the kind of final part in the catharsis, or was it a massive part of it? Or?
It was a huge part writing it down, because it just, it's interesting when I wrote it. So I wrote these 12 pages for a teacher that I have called Imaho. And when I wrote it, he said, put all the details, everything, don't hold back. So I did. That took the 4 years. And when I got my contract, we got to that chapter, which is called All of One Night. They said, we don't think you should put all the details in. It's too much for people to read. And in the beginning, I was like, well, maybe they're right, but then it was still my shame speaking to me. And then when it got to that part, I said, no, actually, I want all the details in. I don't want it to be diluted, so it's easier for people to read it. I don't want to make it less than what it was. I want to be honest. If I'm going to tell it, and I don't know if I'll ever write another book, I want to just tell it exactly how it was. And that was very exposing. It made me feel very vulnerable, but it's like, these are just facts now. It's just like almost writing about anatomy. It's just words now. They don't actually impact on me. And luckily, just before lockdown, my book became an audio book, and I did wonder whether I could listen to it. Would it be too triggering, or whether I could? But I've been walking every day to my 10,000 steps, and I have listened to it last week, and it was okay. It was really okay. But I think the writing of it really helped, putting all the details, but the speaking, standing on the stage and saying, basically, this is me, and I don't care who knows. You know, when I did my TEDx, there were 2,000 people, and I always say it was one of the scariest moments, but one of the most liberating moments. So I think speaking out has really been like the final piece of that jigsaw in my healing path. But you know, I guess it's always, we're never healed completely. I think we're always working and working and working ourselves.
Yeah, we're all works in progress, aren't we? That's how I like to put it. Yeah. Actually, when you're talking there, it just reminded me of the book and the way that you inserted memory, just bits at a time, as it would sort of for someone to experience. I thought that was really clever, how you played with memory there. And again, was that a deliberate choice?
Well, I just, you know, I don't have a CSE in English, I don't have an O-level, I left school with no qualifications, I don't think I'm a writer, but I just wrote it how it was, and that's really how it was, because that night when it happened, I, as you know, left my body. I had an out-of-body experience, and the memories weren't available to me for years. They were just shut down, I numbed off, and I pushed it far from my consciousness. So it was a very trickly effect. They came back to me in stages and moments, and I think because I was out of my body, when they eventually returned, when my eldest daughter became the same age, it felt very surreal, because it felt so dreamlike, because it had felt like a dream, I think, almost at the time. But I know now, if I'd stayed in my body, I would have died. I wouldn't be here today. Your body kicks you out under extreme cases of trauma and stress in order to protect you and save you. So yeah, it's kind of a weird paradox. On one hand, I'm really pleased that I was kicked out of my body. But the other hand, I really struggled to process a lot of the memories. I thought I'd made it up, or it wasn't true, and it was the acceptance of it that took a long time. Really did.
I like your phrase, kicked out of the body, because that's such a good way to describe, I think probably especially with sexual abuse, how whether it's a child, a teenager, an adult will come out of the physical body in order to cope with what's happening with the physical body and kind of remove the mind. And that's, I suppose, the trouble with finding memories, because although I've written my memoir and it landed at exactly 49 chapters, which is my age, I was walking along the river today, and it occurred to me that maybe on my 50th birthday I'll write chapter 50, because who knows what else, because I haven't remembered everything in the memoir. Madeleine's been a beta reader for me along the journey. I haven't remembered it all. I've remembered more than I knew before I wrote it, but there's a certain, events in the novel when I was 10, sorry, it's not a novel, is it, in the memoir when I was 10, that I haven't fully remembered. And obviously Madeleine's quite right, you shouldn't force these things, and I don't want to force anything. But I thought the book would loosen it, and it hasn't loosened it all.
But you know, I don't think the trauma is in our mind, the trauma is in our body. And it comes back when we're ready to face it. We might not believe our mind when it comes back, but you will get access to it when the time is right. Or there's some parts just locked in forever, we might never get access to it.
I accept that, I do accept that, but it's a weird situation to think that you might never know.
Yeah, and then when mine came back, I didn't want to know them. So we're never happy, really, are we? It was overwhelming when I was given all the information. It was a lot. But now, yeah, I saw that I could drive myself completely crazy if I just get caught in denying and refusing to believe. Then that was more damaging than the pictures themselves. So I had to go. Okay, you know, they didn't kill me. I did survive. I'm not what they did to me. And I'm okay, I'm alive, I'm grateful for my life. I'm pleased that I wasn't killed, because so many men and women aren't as lucky as me. They will be raped and killed. So it's kind of weird to be grateful that they didn't kill me, but yeah, I am grateful for my life.
You guys, maybe I'll start with Michael. Do you think the Me Too movement has done good? Has it helped people? Do you think it's encouraged people to speak? Do you think it's very female-based, Michael? Obviously your book, with it being a male, do you find that you see that it's female-based? What do you think?
I do, yes. I mean, I think at the time it was hugely necessary. It had to happen. And I remember most of it came via social media, didn't it? So I was seeing so much on social media, women opening up about their experiences. And I remember watching it and thinking, holy shit, there's so much of this. It was staggering, actually. And then as it developed, I saw some men try to talk about it, their experiences, and one man in particular, whose story was really quite tragic, actually. I mean, he was abused by a female teacher when he was just a wee boy. And his wife had died 5 years before this, and she knew nothing about it. And this was the first time he'd ever opened up.
Wow.
And he was essentially told, be quiet, this is time for women to talk. And I was just, oh, wait a minute, that's not on. So there was that. I'm not saying everyone was like that, but there was a certain, I don't know how to describe it, but there's a certain level of that out there at the time, which I felt deeply, deeply uncomfortable. But in terms of the whole movement, I think it absolutely had to happen, no question.
And I agree, and it's amazing how there is safety in numbers, and how the snowball effect or the ripple effect that I spoke of before, how one person can say, it happened to me too, give someone else the courage to find their voice. You know, I always look for evidence of when I do this kind of work, and when I did the TEDx in Glasgow last June, 2,000 people, and there was one young girl from a high school with her school there, and she heard me, and within moments she said she just couldn't stop crying. She was so triggered by what she was hearing. I've now had contact with this young girl, and she told me that she had been raped by her uncle 3 years prior, and she said if she hadn't heard me, she was going to tell no one because she was so ashamed. But she said hearing me just gave her the strength, and she realized that if I can stand on a stage and share my story, then she could eventually get to a place where she could heal. And now there's police proceedings, and she's in a much, much better place. They discovered other stuff about this uncle, so there's more charges. But to me, that's just like #MeToo. It's just, you know, that ripple effect. And it went across, I don't know how many countries and how many millions of times it was retweeted. And I'm the same with you, Michael. I think there's space for men too, me too. It doesn't matter. Abuse is abuse. Doesn't matter your gender, your nationality, your religion. It knows no boundaries. You know, we know that babies are raped. We know that boys are raped. We know that women in burqas are raped. There's no boundaries. It's not a gender issue at all.
Yeah. The one good thing I feel, because obviously we're all of us a similar generation, is that how powerful this will be for our children, and the hope that our daughters, sons as well, obviously, have the courage to speak out, because it is spoken about. Whereas in the 80s, when I was growing up, and obviously I do explore that in my memoir, I would have never, ever, I mean, I did have, I've never till now said it was abuse, but it was. Madeleine's read it. I trained to be a young DJ when I was 14, and he would force me to sit on his knee, he would put his hand on my leg, and I just thought that was just nothing. And literally now at nearly 50, I wrote about it and I thought, that's disgusting, that's awful, but I never thought at the time. Never went home and told my mum. It just wasn't something I thought of. But I think now, maybe, do you agree that I think young people would come home and tell, possibly?
Absolutely. My mum is 80, and she said it was normal that the boss pinched your bum, grabbed you by the waist, you know, spoke to you inappropriately. So I have 3 girls. I hope they never, ever, ever experience that in any workplace. But also what's great from #MeToo is that the area of consent has been talked about, because it is so important. You know, it wasn't something that was discussed when I was growing up as a teenager as well. But I think if we can bring consent to schools from a really, really young age, not just about sexual consent, but to show young children what a healthy relationship looks like, what respect looks like, what consent about, you know, like if you're forced to hold someone's hand, or if you're forced to go and give your Granny Mary a kiss, and she's got big, you know, hair chins, you don't want to go and kiss her. All these things that I was forced to do as a child, you know, it's all about choice at the end of the day. And I've always told my girls, it doesn't matter if you're naked and you changed your mind, you're in the middle of foreplay, if you say no, then no is what should be expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was before the session came up. I was trying to remind myself of some of the research, and there was a thing. It was an American research paper, and they looked. It was really to look at the attitudes towards male victims of sexual violence, and they reported about a 2011 research paper by the CDC. Now, if you don't know, in America, the CDC is the Center for Disease Control, and they look at all these kind of things as well. So there was this particular year, and from their figures, they extrapolated that in that particular year, no, what was it? Anyway, it was 1.27 million women had experienced, and they put it as non-consensual sexual activity. So it's 1.27 million. But for the males, it was 1.267 million. So the figures are not that different.
And that's what's important, you know, there could be so many more cases as well.
Right, exactly. And then they released this to the media. They mentioned the figure for women, but left out the figure for men. And then there was another thing they talked about. It was a 2008 news report. They found this guy. He was a serial rapist, and he'd raped 5 other men. And in the news report, the guy finished off saying, "But nobody was seriously hurt." I was like, what? Can you imagine?
And is this recent? Is this in recent years? This language has been used.
That was 2008, so
well,
not that long ago.
Isn't it, really? Wow.
Yeah. So it's really underplaying the impact that rape has on a male victim or anyone at all, really, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Michael, would you? I mean, do your themes come from a real place, or is it all imaginary, or is it a bit of both?
Probably a bit of both. I mean, without going into too much detail, I didn't have the best of childhoods.
Yeah.
And those kind of feelings and memories are all there. And those emotions are there. So when I'm writing about other people in different situations, I can tap in to those feelings, because those feelings are universal, aren't they?
Yeah.
Might arise from a different set of circumstances, but the actual emotion is common to us all. So yeah, I'm able to tap into that when I'm writing.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, because a lot of people have said my books are very character-led. When I wrote the memoir, I included some things that people had said, because that was important, that I'm writing about characters and I'm now finally writing about me. And I went to have a look at the reviews of the books. It was such a common thing that people said, Louise listens to all of her characters, she writes her characters very emotionally, gets to the heart of them, they're very real, and that's mentioned far more than plot. And I just interesting.
Yeah, I think both of your books, so you both cover topics that maybe other people don't really are brave enough to cover, and they're both very hard-hitting but full of heart. You both are able to capture that really, really well. You do raise some good issues that we need to face in society that are maybe not spoken about, and you both write beautifully anyway. But yeah, they're obviously fiction, but they come with an important message as well.
And the next book, Michael, I gather has a theme of this as well. Are you happy to tell us a little bit about the next one? Because you just did your cover reveal.
Yeah, so I'm still not used to talking about this yet, so I don't quite know the way to do it without saying too much.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's called A Song of Isolation, and
very during coronavirus.
Actually, you know what? I thought, should I change that? Because it may have like negative connotations for people. But I came up with the title in October, and so it's about a character she's a very famous actress, and she steps back from the movie world to live with just an ordinary guy in an ordinary part of Scotland, and then her boyfriend, she thinks everything's nice and settled, and her boyfriend's accused of molesting the next door neighbour's child. So then the book deals with the fallout from that. So I tell it from the perspective of the accused man, Amelie, the actress, and then the little girl. I tell her side of the story as well. So it's kind of an investigation of celebrity, but and also how all of these things tie in together and how people might be affected by them. So I don't want to say too much because I might give something away.
When can we get it? That's what I want to know. When
September.
is it? September.
September, yes.
Oh, Michael. Do I get early coffee?
I'm sure we can. You know the publisher, so you might.
I actually know her, yeah. That sounds great.
I think the ebook's out in July.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to wait till July. I'm going to harass Karen.
Actually, she sent me a copy of your last book. It said, "Dear Madeleine, from Louise via Michael," or something. It was signed on your behalf. It was great. Good post to get.
Funnily enough, what will be my next one, hopefully, I mean, I've not signed a contract yet, but I'm pretty sure Karen will be fine. But Madeleine's, again, been a beta reader. It explores consent and sexual issues with a young autistic man who is looking for sex and love, and it explores our judgment of someone with a disability or a condition, and their right, as much as anyone else, isn't it, to find love. And so again, these topics and themes, we've obviously got a lot of scope with them, haven't we?
But you know, I don't want to get too involved in your next book, but we are biology at the end of the day. We're 99% biology. Of course he's going to have sexual needs like everybody else, but it's really interesting, the judgment, isn't it? Just because he's autistic doesn't mean that he doesn't have sexual urges like everybody else.
It's something that people laugh at in, what's that programme called? The Undateables. And don't get me wrong, that can be a fun show. I'm not saying it can't. But there's an element of mockery.
It is, yeah.
Which makes me really sad, especially when I've got a lot of friends who are on the spectrum. Wonderful people who I love dearly. And I think
it's kind of, we have that kind of attitude towards sex with most people anyway, don't we? I remember years ago I had a poetry collection out, and I was working in this place. There was about 300 people there in the office, and a few of them bought the book. Now the poems in there covered all kinds of topics, but there was one that was kind of a sensual kind of poem. Let's describe it that way.
I have a collection, Michael. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So that was all people could talk about. Oh my God, what have you done there? It was like you have sex. Oh my God. It was like, for Christ's sake, can we be grown up about this? It was just.
And that's about normalizing it, isn't it? You know, everybody has sex, is normal. But yeah, why should it be taboo? Is conditioning, isn't it? It's how we're conditioned or how we're led to believe that we don't discuss these things because it's considered rude or inappropriate. But if we never discuss these things, then we'll never be able to discuss these things. So we need to bring all these things out into the open. So I can't wait to see the impact that Sebastian will have, because it's going to be very, very thought-provoking for a lot of people. It's really, yes, I can see book clubs going, yeah, but what did you really think? Should he be going to see? Yeah, it's going to be great to see when that one hits the shelves.
I'm nervous as well, though. I think it could be a love-hate thing. The story was inspired by a real-life friend and her autistic son. And so she kind of was at my side when I wrote the book, and I met with her and I spoke to him to get inside his head and get his voice right in the book. So I'm nervous, but I feel like I've got her on side, you know, if anything happens, because obviously it's a juicy topic when you explore autism. You know, if you yourself are not, or you don't have a child who is, people can be a little bit, why do you think you can write about that? But, you know, it was a story that needed writing.
Yeah.
So see, let's talk about your latest book, Louise. Karen will never forgive us if we don't.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about I Am Dust.
Okay, I Am Dust. Another one that was written during a traumatic time.
Is there a theme here, Louise?
Well, there is, because I do find great comfort in writing. I'm not gonna lie.
Therapy, huh?
absolute. That is my therapy, absolutely. And I
You'll never get completely sorted or completely happy because we'll never get the books.
Yeah, that's true. So no, I'm not going to say that aloud. I was going to say, "Come on, keep hitting me." No, don't stop.
Sorry, back to your latest book.
Yeah, I started it 12 days after my mum tragically, she jumped off the Humber Bridge. She is alive and well. She's in a wheelchair now, but she's mentally recovering. So I started it 12 days after that. And it's set in a haunted theatre. We have a young woman called Chloe who's an usher. And she dabbled with the Ouija boards in her past. And she's kind of forgotten, bit of memory thing there again, forgotten what happened there. And there's a huge musical called Dust, which was the biggest show in this theatre 20 years ago, but on the fourth night the actress was murdered, so the show shut down. But it's coming back now on the 20th anniversary, and the actress who plays the character this time has a bit of a dark history with our Chloe the usher. So that's all I'll say about that one. So it's a bit of a ghost story, love story, psychological thriller, a bit of everything.
Yeah, it's a very different feel, isn't it? The ghosty part of it, but I loved that part of it. It was brilliant.
Oh yeah, it was just genuinely creepy.
Good.
I was sitting out in the sunshine and I was actually getting chills when I was reading it while I was sitting sunbathing. See the brown head? Yeah. Well done. It was superb.
Wow, we've covered a lot, haven't we, in our time? We really have.
I think really all of our books, whether they're fiction, non-fiction, memoir, they'll never go out of date because sadly abuse, domestic abuse, childhood sexual abuse, rape, it doesn't seem to be ending any day now, and people will always need to read these stories. There'll always be a need, but hopefully the more we air them and the more we speak about it, maybe we'll bring in some understanding, and one day we'll realise where we need to change as a society, how we need to treat men and women differently.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself, Madeleine. This is why you're a speaker.
Not a writer.
Yeah, that's probably time out then, time up.
I think so.
Time's up.
Well, it's a shame to draw it to a close, but it's been lovely seeing you guys.
Oh, it's been fabulous.
Talking to you.
Oh gosh, I could sit here for hours and just talk to us. It's great, isn't it?
And kind of say huge thanks to Emma, because I've never been in a Zoom meeting before with a BSL interpreter before, so that was...
You're welcome, thank you.
One at the theatre, we often have a show when there's a long run. Maybe twice we'll have a BSL, and it's funny, especially if the show's quite an explicit one, and where me and Usher, I'm learning the words. Right.
Yeah,
we won't sign off with any explicit words, Louise. Always has to lower the tone, doesn't she?
What more would you expect from me?
So hopefully we will see you all in the flesh, so to speak, next year live at Newcastle Royal. I look forward to it.
Can't wait.
You'll live again one day.
Love you all.
Big love.
Bye bye. Bye bye.